I am so happy to have everyone here, here together as we start this process, as we start this journey together. So I'm going to give just a little brief introduction, but and then we'll share this. We'll allow Michelle to share her screen. Paige, do you want to start recording now?
I actually already did. I hope that's okay. I can edit out the introductions.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to give just like the briefest of introductions to our Cornell Cooperative Extension partners here. So we have our extensions from Dutchess, Ulster, and Columbia-Greene, which is 2 counties combined. And these cooperative extensions have really been one of the main mechanisms through which the state programs like Climate Smart Communities or Clean Energy Communities with NYSERDA, they've been one of the main mechanisms through which local communities have been able to get resources and technical expertise and guidance when it comes, with many things with cooperative extensions. But for our purposes, they've really become the local knowledge keepers for this kind of climate work, and they're serving their local populations. And so in terms of municipalities getting things like trainings and support and that technical guidance. So when designing local champions, we knew that partnering with Cornell Cooperative Extensions would be one of the most valuable parts of the program. And so we have funded these folks so that they can work particularly one-on-one with you in a very customized way and do this certification assessment process with you. So as you know, this will be track 3 of the Local Champions project. And it's going to consist of these individual meetings that you'll have with your corresponding Cornell Cooperative Extension staff person. And then starting tomorrow, maybe even this afternoon, I'm hoping after this presentation, you and your Cornell Cooperative Extension person should get in touch and start scheduling your first sessions. So I'm hoping those could even happen next week, just so we can get the ball rolling. But for this first intro session, we wanted to get everyone in the same virtual room to be able to meet these Cornell Cooperative Extension staff members, put those faces to the names, but then also have them explain how the work with you will flow and what that collaboration will look like. So we've asked them to explain the certification assessment process. And we've also asked them to share some examples of certification assessments that they've done in the past to sort of demystify the process a little bit so you know what you're getting into. And then we'll do Q&A after the presentation. So now I'd like to pass it to Michelle Gluck, who is in the Dutchess location, and she will take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Vanessa. It's super exciting to be here with all of you. And I'll try and demystify the process as much as I can. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen. Set this up. Okay, did that work out?
Yep.
Yep. All right. Good. Okay. Cool. So yeah, as Vanessa said, my name is Michelle Gluck. I'm a resource educator in the Environment and Energy program at CCE Dutchess County. And I'll just quickly introduce my other CCE colleagues at the other counties too. So I believe Melinda and Brent are here from CCE Ulster, and then we have Kelsey West and Connor Young from Columbia-Greene that are here with us today, and then also Carolyn Clocker from CCE Dutchess as well. And Carolyn manages or coordinates our Climate Resilience Partnership. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little background on Cornell Cooperative Extension, and I'll try and not use acronym, I'm trying to like define the acronyms before I use them, but definitely CCE, Cornell Cooperative Extension, from here on forward in my presentation. So we are a subordinate governmental agency associated with Cornell University and its land grant mission. And that's since the establishment of land grant colleges in the late 1800s through the Morrill Land Grant Act. And that essentially just provided states public lands to create agricultural colleges. So, so then from that, our federal government created cooperative extensions throughout our whole country, which is pretty neat to learn about. And originally it had this agricultural focus where these cooperative extensions were disseminating information and research-based information to agricultural operators and farmers. But then since then, of course, that we've grown from just agricultural focused content, as you can see here, how we're all here today, focused on climate resiliency, and more environmental focused work. And so, as I said, it's like a national network of cooperative extensions. We are Cornell Cooperative Extension in New York because our land grant university is Cornell University. And then, so with that, as I mentioned, like we're all a little bit unique in our program areas and how we operate. So I do have here links to our specific county extensions. As Vanessa noted earlier, Cornell Cooperative Extension for Columbia and Greene counties are joined together. So like there's just different unique aspects to each of our extensions. So feel free to visit each of your county's cooperative extension website and familiarize yourself. In connection to what I said about land grant colleges, these colleges were funded from the sale profits of lands that were forcefully acquired from Indigenous peoples. So we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the history of that and what occurred through this land acknowledgement. And that this means being mindful just that the land that we all currently reside on and are stewarding now is the homeland of Indigenous peoples. So in our region, I just a map here that shows the Esopus Munsee, the Mohegan, the Wappingers, the Wawara Wonkong, and the Wawarsing are the Indigenous tribes that mainly populated our 4 counties. So the land that is our home is their homeland. Okay, so a little bit of information about our climate resilience partnership. The Climate Resilience Partnership for CCE has existed since 2012. And so it involves a collaborative of Mid-Hudson region CCEs. So the 3 CCEs that we're all a part of, Ulster, Columbia-Greene, and Dutchess, as well as various other CCEs in the Hudson Valley region, joined together to support municipalities with climate resiliency planning efforts. And largely, this work includes actions of the Climate Smart Communities program. And this is how we started conducting the certification assessments that we'll be conducting with all of you. So just a little bit so you can get the picture of some of the work we've done, a snapshot into it. Since 2018, the CCE Climate Resilience Partnership has provided assistance to 33 communities to complete 45 adaptation actions within the New York State Climate Smart Communities program. And we've assisted 10 communities with climate smart community assessments. And then also really exciting is that we've also assisted 3 communities with successful submission for New York State Climate Smart Communities certification. So then in 2021, we'll be completing an additional 6 assessments through our partnership here. All right, so want to start off with just laying out the process and the goals of the Climate Smart Communities certification assessment. So as I said, we started conducting these assessments through our Climate Resilience Partnership work. And we really saw a need for this work as we to just support municipalities in investigating like where to start, right? So it's really to support municipalities on their journey to achieve climate smart community certification and ease what can be a very steep learning curve needed for climate smart task forces, CACs, or whoever is tasked with tackling, this program and certification submittal. So the assessment provides a step-by-step method of not just to like check off boxes of which actions a municipality may have completed, but to really take that deep dive and through our facilitated meetings and investigative work, hone in on the actions that have been completed, are in progress, or partially completed, and which are prioritized recommendations for your municipality, so that you clearly can reach certification at either a bronze or silver level. And as part of that, it's also kind of doing assessment and goal setting to make sure the actions that you're pursuing align with your community's climate action goals and needs. So that, to summarize just goals, we're determining community's readiness towards achieving climate smart community certification, becoming just familiarized and organized, so that if your community does decide to submit for certification whenever you're ready, that you have what you need to do so. And then again, that prioritizing of climate action goals. On completion of the assessment, your municipality will receive a customized working file of all of the climate smart communities actions, and I'll get into what this really is. And then also secondly, a finalized certification assessment report. So the working file will track completed, in progress, or recommended actions. And again, it's a working file, it's a living document, so it's going to be updated as you're going. And you can organize your notes in this and that sort of thing. Sorry. And then the certification assessment really summarizes and packages the whole assessment process, and that's created out of that working file. Okay. So on Tuesday, I believe you all got a taste of the portal maybe and the actions. So you have a basic understanding of what that website looks like. And I think, can't really see everyone, but yeah. Okay, so you can see a snapshot of that. And then below that, I just have a screenshot of what our working file looks like for the assessment. And why we created this is that you really can't do much planning and put notes in or anything in the portal account itself. You're able to just say whether something's unplanned or planned or completed, but that's about it. And then you're really using that for submittal. So we created this working file just so you can play around and track more easily and in more detail where how to what extent you've accomplished each action. Some actions have a range of points that you can receive for them. So for example, PE6, planning and infrastructure for bicycling and walking, you can get anywhere from 2 to 15 points for that. So we organized it as far as points possible, anticipated points. So maybe you would say, oh, we can get 8 to 10 points for this action. So you get your conservative estimate and then a more optimistic estimate, I guess, of your points for a specific action, whether it's completed, in progress, recommended. And then also something I wanted to note is that we have a column where you have the main contact information for whatever point person might be attributed to each action. And that's, I think, really helpful to have. So, because there's so many actions and potentially individuals involved or, contacts. So it's pretty helpful. And then any notes about a project that might be relevant to an action. So you have it all there. Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure I hit. And then I also just wanted to know, I mentioned that we track both just like how many points you could get for each action as part of the program, and then your anticipated points that like your municipality likely would receive for that action. And that's really important because in order to submit for bronze level certification, you need at least 120 points to even like click that submit button and have your application reviewed. So we want to be able to really narrow down the accuracy of like realistically what your municipality has, because you don't want to end up shortfalling right around an application cycle and miss that opportunity for your application to be reviewed. You want to just be realistic about your timeline and goal setting, and that you're meeting those requirements. So you can see that this is an example of like a working file that's in progress and where you have a big range of potential or anticipated points for a municipality. We really want to narrow down that range so we get a clear estimate. So here with the bottom example, there's two things to note. One is that like that's a really what you're shooting for as far as like a range of potential points. But then you can also see it's about 100 points. That municipality only needs 20 more points to achieve submittal. So they might say, okay, like, what are some ways we can bump us up for those extra points and maybe create a little bit of a buffer. So then here I'm showing an example of a finished, that second deliverable, the finalized certification assessment report. So the first, I'm just going to walk you through the sections of this document. So the first section is a summary, and it really takes up like the first page. And that's where we're just giving that snapshot. So the content of this example, in reading through the summary, you're going to learn that this municipality likely achieved approximately 150 points towards certification. They've completed 3 priority actions, and they have 3 more that they're planning to launch this upcoming year. So those are really important pieces to note because of the requirements of the program. You need at least 120 points for bronze. You need at least 3 priority actions. So that information is clearly explained. Then you're giving readers sufficient background information and like the context of the Climate Smart Communities program and this whole process that we've just completed. And that's so you're setting up the readers to read through the following sections, which gets into a lot of detail about each actions, you'll see, but like completed actions and progress and plans. So they at least have that context. And then that's important because this is a document that you could share with your town supervisor. If you don't have a Climate Smart Task Force yet, you can share it with task force members so they get the full picture. And it really can help you create community buy-in, especially with your municipal, either town or supervisor or mayor, and get them excited and say that, hey, we're really close to this program, let's go for it. Then the next section is next steps. And that's where we're advising municipal stakeholders on a realistic timeline for submittal, where they can focus momentum, or highlighting specific actions that might be underway, like a comprehensive plan update, and then providing any customized recommendations that come out of this process, like if they've completed any NYSERDA high impact actions, we might suggest looking into that more. All right, and then if your municipality has not completed either of the mandatory actions, we're likely going to include a section on, mandatory recommended actions, just so you clearly can see those need to be completed in order to submit for certification. So that would be forming a Climate Smart Task Force, which it sounds like a lot of you are working on or just completed, which is great, and identifying that Climate Smart Communities coordinator. The next section likely could be completed actions, And that's what it sounds like, which is just noting every action that has been completed and what year it's been completed. And then also we include information as far as like what needs to be submitted for that specific action. Then you have in progress actions. And in this section, we'll note why we're including that action, because this is where some of that institutional knowledge comes in for each action. Like if it's in progress, what's a snapshot of like where that action is right now? Why are we including it? And that's really helpful just so everyone can track it and has that same knowledge base. And then we have prioritized recommended actions. So these are all like the goal setting actions. And we usually lay those out for like, the next 1 to 5 years down the line. We also have why this action, so that you have the community the justification of why that is a recommendation and the suggested timeline of completion. And then the last thing I wanted to note is that we include suggested funding sources for both in progress and those prioritized recommended actions, because obviously you might want to pursue funding or need supplemental funding for an action that's in progress. And these sections might be reordered or customized based on your work with your CCE contact, or just how you'd think they should be best ordered. Okay, so who's involved? When myself and my CCE colleagues were brainstorming who's involved in this process, we thought it might work best to separate those that are involved into primary and secondary collaborators. So for primary collaborators, those are really the individuals who might have that institutional knowledge about and community history to really be able to say help you figure out what's been completed to this point. And then really you want a strong project lead here, obviously in your primary team. So that would be a climate smart community coordinator or yourselves as the local champions leading that. You might have your conservation advisory committee, so your CAC, or a subgroup of your CAC involved, or one representative, climate smart community task force members, possibly a supervisor or mayor, depending on their level of commitment or interest. And obviously they have a lot of this knowledge. And then possibly a village clerk or town clerk, especially if you're thinking that you're going to be moving right into submittal. It's good to involve them at the beginning of the process if they might have different community contacts or municipal contacts, and connect you with either finding information or staff that you need to communicate with. And then possibly 1 or 2 select municipal staff. With that said, each municipality is a different size and has different capacity for this. So your primary collaborators might be a group of 2 to 4 people. It might be up to 6. So don't worry about that. There's a lot of variation there. And then for secondary collaborators, those are any contacts that you might be reaching out with a set of specific questions. You might reach out to select municipal staff, like the engineer, about 5 different actions and just say, hey, can we set a time to meet and go through these? Or we're working on goal setting. What are some of your biggest challenges right now relating to flooding, that sort of stuff. And also you might be reaching out to different town boards, or you might say the full CAC they're more of secondary collaborators instead of primary. And they're really who you might reach out to, again, with the specific questions, or to come to a meeting to review that draft certification assessment. Or you might share it with them through email and ask them to review. Moving on to the timeline. So this is just a basic timeline of how it's worked in the past. But initially, we're going to host an initial meeting with our primary collaborators. We'll be reviewing the Climate Smart Communities Action Checklist, just getting everyone on the same page as far as this whole process, and sharing some of the information we're sharing with you all today, but like condensed. And then from there, we're really working, and also probably in that first meeting, we'll also touch upon climate action goal setting a bit too, and understand where the municipality is at. Then from there, we're really working to populate the Excel assessment working file, Climate Smart Community Assessment working file. And then based on, the results of that working file progress, then the CCE staff, us, will provide a draft certification assessment report. And then all primary collaborators, local champions will review that. We'll have discussion, we'll likely revise it. And eventually you might say, okay, this assessment is ready to be sent out to, secondary collaborators. If you feel like it's useful to involve them there, they'll have a chance to review it. And then we end up with our finalized certification assessment, which I believe you will all present those at the end of July. I think it's your July 22nd meeting. So we definitely are shooting to have those finalized so that you are prepared to present them at that meeting. And then I also wanted to note that I believe in mid-June to early July or mid-July, you'll have that opportunity to meet with representatives from Ty & Bond, a consulting firm, and they'll be working with you to provide guidance on technical assistance, feasibility studies, and different grants. And so we'll be trying to provide have those draft assessments prepared so that you will have those to look over with those that assistance and benefit from that. All right, and then lastly, just want to note that throughout the whole process, I think I've identified maybe that there's at least 2 like formal meetings for either getting started and reviewing. But throughout this whole process, there's going to be a lot of back and forth, like phone calls, email discussions, and different more passive work that's happening. And how does this all integrate into the Local Champions program? I mentioned, that one example, working with Ty & Bond and where that fits in, but really we're looking for you to be applying all the techniques and learning content from your cohort program directly into the assessment progress as you can. So definitely be looking for those learning opportunities and ways to kind of practice what you're learning immediately. Our staff, our CCE staff, will be available to help with just general questions at every other one of your office hours. So that's another way to we're integrated and to utilize our support. And then we'll be meeting at a minimum of 2 times per month. But again, it's not just like radio silence between those meetings. We're definitely going to be having email exchanges back and forth, possibly phone calls or a Zoom meeting. It all depends on kind of what your best working style is. So we'll figure that out with each other. All right. This was a really fun thing to brainstorm together. So our CCE colleagues gathered tips for success for you all because we've completed a lot of these certification assessments thus far. So, and you're the only, I think, ones that really are going to be getting these tips, but maybe we'll start sharing it with others that are completing the assessment too. But first off, keep actively engaged. It's you really want a motivated stakeholder group. So when you're brainstorming your primary collaborators, try and make sure you're thinking about who is super motivated, who has the capacity and the time to do this, and who has that also that institutional knowledge and information. You really want to involve the appropriate individuals. This is related, but identify a key point person or leader at the beginning of the process. You've already done that really well through establishing you as local champions in this cohort. The more thorough you are in completing the assessment, the more prepared your municipality will be for the submittal process. So always know that, like, you know, what are we shooting for? And know that now the work you do now will make the work later easier. Encourage brainstorming and open sharing for all projects, even if someone might not think it's relevant. I don't know how many times I'm in a meeting assessing, looking into a community's existing actions that they've completed, and someone like is about to say something and then doesn't, and I'm like, well, what were you going to share? And then they are like, oh, I don't think it's a relevant project. And then I'm like, no, say it anyway. And then of course it's like, nope, that definitely fits into this action or that action. So definitely share it all. And then lastly, stay on target. So also at meetings, sometimes what happens is we're looking at all these different actions and potential projects, and a couple, people might get really excited about one that they want as a goal or a recommendation. And then they start actually planning it out while we're really just doing an assessment of like actions that have been completed or setting a couple potential recommendations. We're not trying to actually plan out specific projects through this process. So just stay on target. We're looking at completing the assessment, what's been completed, and goal setting. Common pitfalls. Avoid standardization. So we want to incorporate the unique aspects and interests of your community. If it's too standardized of an assessment, it's not going to really fulfill its purpose, and you won't get everything that you need to actually inform and be most beneficial for submittal for climate smart communities. Secondly, don't get distracted by starting to again, this is what I kind of said as far as staying on target, but don't start to plan out specific actions when we're really trying to just assess currently what the municipality has done thus far. This is all about mostly about what's been completed. And then lastly, try not to overwhelm your community's capacity. So we're trying to keep realistic about what is achievable over the next 5 years or so. And that could be a combination of low-hanging fruit or like larger, more foundational projects. So definitely try and recognize your capacity and be realistic there. Okay. All right, so that moves us into municipal specific approaches to climate smart communities actions and different tactics and how to organize actions. So here you can see an example of a city, a hamlet, and then a more rural area. So that's Kingston, Germantown, and Unionville. So the really neat part about the Climate Smart Communities program is that it's a super comprehensive program, and the actions are applicable to all different municipalities at different types, scales, and sizes. So whether you are a city or a village or a more rural area or a town with hamlets or even a county, there's a path to achieving Climate Smart Communities certification, and there's enough varied Climate Smart Communities actions to meet the needs of any municipality type. So just know that going into it. It really just takes thoughtful planning and kind of like matchmaking. And that's where CCE staff come in, because we've done, again, a lot of these assessments. We work with a lot of municipalities. So we can kind of help you navigate that and understand and pair actions that might be a good fit, but also know, okay, likely what actions your municipality likely may have completed and doing that searching. And then less to this point, just an example. So some actions are definitely more forgiving with this and being more applicable to a wide range of municipalities. So So like complete streets policy, like every municipality, as far as I know, in New York has streets. So you can definitely make that action applicable to an urban area, to a city, to a town, to a more rural area. But then there's some actions such as a PE7 action, nature-based shorelines, that really only make sense to municipalities that have hardened shorelines or engineered shorelines and structures that can be retrofitted. So that's just an example. We also thought it would be important to note a little bit of terminology and to differentiate between climate mitigation and climate adaptation. So just understanding these two terms at a basic level may help you determine and help group different actions that municipality has completed or may want to pursue. So climate change mitigation is really about being proactive to lessen our usage and emitting of greenhouse gases, or to offset those emissions through carbon sinks or greenhouse gas storage opportunities. So an example of that is a P6 action, planting trees. Climate change adaptation, on the other hand, works from a different angle to prepare for the impacts of climate change through adapting to our built, and social environments and systems, through, such as relocating structures or buildings that are vulnerable to flooding due to sea level rise. So depending on your municipality, you may want to prioritize adaptation actions over mitigation, or vice versa, or make sure you're kind of balancing both, like in some of your prioritized recommendations. And then this is just a graphic that helps you see some different examples of topics that are adaptation oriented and some that are mitigation. These are not direct climate smart community actions, but a lot of the climate smart community actions are applicable to these topics. And then, so sometimes there's a topic area that falls under both climate mitigation and climate adaptation as well. And both climate change mitigation and adaptation actions are woven throughout all 12 of the pledge elements of the Climate Smart Communities program. I will say that PE7, Enhanced Community Resilience to Climate Change, houses a large concentration of climate adaptation actions. And a good exercise for you all might be to just go through that Climate Smart Community Action Checklist and highlight or put like an A or an M next to which you think are like climate mitigation oriented and which might be more climate adaptation oriented, just to like get a feel for that. Okay, so then another way to approach, sifting through these actions and understanding them is by grouping the actions in a way that's more relatable. So as I said, and I'm sure as you learned Tuesday, there's 12 different pledge element areas. There's over 100 actions, which is very overwhelming. So it's okay to like reorganize or group these actions in a way that just makes more sense. So for example, which actions are policy and planning oriented, which are capital improvement projects or capital projects, and which are community engagement. So I'll just give a couple examples of each of these. So a policy and planning action might be, like I mentioned before, complete streets policy. It could involve updating a comprehensive plan. That's also a PE6 action. Capital projects could be PE6, planning and infrastructure for biking and walking. Another example is PE8, brownfield site redevelopment. So those are both examples of like those bigger capital projects. And then community engagement for municipalities. A lot of those are housed under pledge element 9. So an example would be local climate action website, creating that, or another one that's not in pledge element 9 would be PE8, buy local or buy green campaign. So yeah, you can just kind of get a sense of where each of these actions fall under policy and planning, capital and projects, community engagement, and kind of organize that. You can also approach the actions thinking about how there's synergies between different actions and how there's different patterns or like themes that connect them. And then also how there could be actions that build upon each other. Yeah, so some climate smart communities actions build upon the foundational work of others. And then, and some are more like long-term investments. And then there's some low-hanging fruit as well. And then before, as I just showed the example of just grouping them, some are policy and planning, capital improvements, or community engagement. So, so this first on the left, the diagram that I show here is just an example of how, let's say your municipality is, very focused on bikeable, walkable communities, or has been. You can actually use this method for either tracing back like what actions your municipality has likely completed, as well as when you're doing that goal setting component too. But let's say your municipality is very focused on like building bikeable, walkable communities. You might look into pledge element 6, bicycle and pedestrian planning, and see if your municipality has a bicycle pedestrian plan, or if it has done a lot of work to improve like bike signage or bike paths or walking paths and that sort of thing. So this is a lot of like that foundational work and capital projects. And then another action that ties into bicycle and pedestrian planning would be PE6, complete streets policy. That's definitely policy and planning oriented. And then a low-hanging fruit action that also happens to be community engagement is pledge element 9, climate-related public event, like your municipality could have or could host an event that teaches about bike safety or the environmental benefits of biking. And then on the right, you can see an example of actions that are building upon each other. So, so your municipality might start with a pledge element 2, a government operations greenhouse gas inventory. From there, the next step would be for that municipality to create a climate action plan reflective of the results of that inventory. And out of that plan would come recommendations which could include pledge element 6, renewable energy feasibility study, and a green power procurement policy. So that's just an example of how there could be kind of a flow and a hierarchy to actions and how they fit together. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to say is just some words of wisdom for you all. To just keep in mind that some actions definitely, like as I mentioned earlier, there could be some irrelevant actions to your municipality, and that's totally okay. The Climate Smart Communities program is a program where we don't encourage you to necessarily like say yes to everything, unless it's in response, I'd say, to like when we're going through what actions you've completed, and it's actually true that you've done like, yes, done it all. But yeah, so it's definitely not realistic to approach all of this, right? And it's definitely about celebrating like small victories, large victories of what your municipality has done, and then setting a realistic and intentional path towards achieving certification through community buy-in and support. So that's really what we're looking for here. And with that, oh, I forgot to do those, but with that, I will move on to questions. And I definitely encourage my CCE colleagues to help field questions here. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was great.
Thank you,
I'm gonna drink
Michelle.
some water.
Yeah.
Great job.